Hello, everyone. Welcome to another Sunday talk within the Nine-Sided Circle. I am your host, Noor Kyle.
And I am her faithful sidekick, Mushtaq Ali.
Yes, and we would like to welcome you here. Those of you who are here live, thanks for showing up and hanging out with us. And for you guys who are watching on the replay, you're joining in with us too, and we are very happy to have you here as well. So, yep, YouTube spiel. I invite you, if you so desire, which would greatly benefit us, of course, to subscribe to our channel, leave some comments, and of course, like this video if you find it interesting and learn something from it. And maybe you just had a great time watching it. All of those are great reasons to let us know you appreciated our hard work. And of course, the contributions of all our amazing friends here who help make this as wonderful as it is. We couldn't do it without you guys. So thank you.
Yeah, if it wasn't for the people who join us, you'd just have to listen to us, and that would be boring.
Oh my God, that would be boring week after week. We would be bored, but here we are. We are not bored because we have such geniuses joining us every week. Thank God for that. So, anything else I need to add? I think I just need to say that we have many links in our description that you may find useful, such as the ability to join our email list, which these days I highly recommend, as that is the best way to keep in touch with us, regardless of what crazy stuff is going on with social media. But because social media is still active, of course, we are still very much active on our Facebook group. Link in the description, of course. You can follow our Facebook page. You can follow our Instagram. I am going to be in the midst of kind of dialing up our social media usage just to keep it flowing, keep the energy moving online so that we can make sure that we keep this a vibrant, active community and that the people who need the information we have to offer find ways to trip into it and gain benefit from it because that is our ultimate goal. Not to hoard our knowledge, but to share it so that you all can carry it on and share it with others. So, uh, yeah, you can check out all the links in our description. Maybe you'll find something interesting to you. You can even email us to ask if you might like to do a private session with one or both of us. We are definitely still offering those. All you got to do is get in touch with us and we'll give you the link you need to find our booking page and payment and all of that stuff.
Yeah, and
That,
it is, in fact, a great way to supercharge your work.
yes,
We won't light
yes.
a fire under your ass.
Yeah, yeah, and it'll give you a chance to ask any and all of your questions that maybe you're too afraid to ask here on a recording, understandably. We're here for you. If and when you need us, we're happy to offer help. So, without further ado, let's get to our topic this evening.
What is our topic this evening?
We are talking about a couple of different things, which in a way are really sort of the same thing. And we are going to be taking inspiration from Gurdjieff and what has been called the God state, and Ibn Arabi and what has been called the unity of being, Wahdat al-Wujud. So, we'll be revisiting these topics that we have touched on before, but as always, in a way that is a different spin than ways that has been talked about previously. And we'll be building on things that we talked about last week and things that we talked about just a few weeks ago as well.
Yeah, it should be noted that as far as we can tell, Gurdjieff never used the term the God state, just
And
as Ibn
yeah,
Arabi never used the term Wahdat al-Wujud.
interestingly enough, yes.
Yeah. So the term comes not from Gurdjieff himself, but from his students and students of his students and students of his students of his students and students of his students of his students of his students. But it's an interesting term and it does capture a certain idea. And so we're stealing it so that we can talk about it.
That's God state, right?
Yeah, that's God state.
And the
And
same
it's
thing
equivalent
is true.
to Ibn Arabi's idea of the
Yes.
unity of the divine.
Or what came to be known as. It was his
Yes.
idea, came to be known over time as this idea of the unity of being. Yep. Yeah. All right. So let's unpack that, shall we, Mushtaq?
Yes. So to talk about this, we have to talk about a phenomena. And the phenomena is called second wind. Now, if you've heard about second wind, it's usually in the context of exercise, most often running. And that's not what we're talking about, but it becomes a metaphor for what we are talking about. And many of you have heard of this concept of super effort. And super effort is not what you're looking for. What you're looking for is hitting your spiritual second wind. And when you do that, you enter into a different state of consciousness. And that state is a state. It's a hal, not a maqam. You don't get to stay there. But you get to go there and use that state for your benefit. How, the question is, do you get there? How do you catch second wind in exercise? It's simple. It's not easy, but it's simple. You push yourself to the point where you go into respiratory distress. Not total respiratory distress where you crash and burn, like you're not trying to do a sprint for 2 miles, but you push yourself to the point where you enter respiratory distress and you hold yourself there beyond the point where you think you can, and then you will hit your second wind. And you know when you hit your second wind because all of a sudden the respiratory distress is gone. You're still moving at the same speed. You're still doing what you're doing, but there is no, oh my God, I am starving for oxygen. Your body shifts the gear and it's very weird. And there's a lot of stuff we can talk about with that, but we aren't going to tonight. We're just going to talk about this one aspect of it. And the distress that we look for in this practice is the distress of holding yourself conscious, of being present, being present past the amount of time where it's comfortable. Now, last week we talked about attentional blinks. This contains the idea of holding your attention beyond the point where you want to blink, just literally wrestling with it to keep yourself awake. And if you do this at the right pace for enough time, you will hit a spiritual second wind. And that state can be pretty amazing and very useful. So, what is the state that we're looking for? This state of second wind feels like you will slip into a sense of peace. The universe becomes a bit more vivid. Uh, and if you're not careful, it can be disorienting. You'll get, if you become disoriented, you will assume that you're being watched by a higher power or your thoughts are influencing reality. And you might see complex geometric patterns. Uh, and that tells you that you have gone off the rails a little bit.
Missed the mark a little bit.
Missed the mark, which case you have to back off because therein lies delusion. Now, this doesn't mean that you may not be guided by a higher power, but if you start believing that you are, you're screwed.
That's an interesting paradox, huh?
It really is. So you have to know grounding techniques. The most important grounding technique is breath and attendance to physical sensation.
And that means literally.
Yeah, that means feeling yourself in your body, going back to that.
Yep.
You need the grounding of the body in order to do this well. The second is proper zikr. Proper zikr will act as a ground for you.
We should make sure people, I know many of you here are familiar with what that means, but for
Tell
those
them what that
maybe
means, Noor.
just tuning in, it is a word that tends to mean remembrance. And some people think of it in the context of using a phrase, often in the Islamic context. It's a name of the divine. There are said to be 99 names of the divine, and you pick one, two, three, and you repeat them over and over again. And some people can use this as a way to trance out. It's kind of like when you say a word over and over and it begins to lose meaning for you. We're not talking about that. We want to make sure as we're saying this name, let's say, or names, that we're remembering what it means as we say it. We're holding on to its significance as we say it and using that as a way to stay grounded and present and intentional. What do you think?
Yeah, sounds right. There are specific zikrs that are appropriate to this practice. And
Yeah.
they tend to be longer than just one or two names. One of the most common goes, Hasbi Rabbi Jallallah, Ma fi qalbi ghairallah, Nur Muhammad Sallallah, La ilaha illallah. That's a focusing zikr. It says basically, Oh my Lord, you're enough for me. There is nothing in my heart but God. Muhammad is the light, or that one is hard for me to translate. So if somebody like Osama would jump in at any time, feel free. And then the last, of course, is there is no God but God.
Yeah, that's perfect. That's that's exactly what it is.
Yeah. So the meaning is always significant in the way that we're describing this.
Yeah. And this is designed to specifically focus you, right? It starts with God is enough. How could God not be enough? But we oftentimes think like, oh, I would like God and money. That's one of my favorites. You know, oh Lord, I would like to prove to you my virtue by winning the lottery and showing you that I could handle the money. He doesn't believe me.
If you loved me, you would pay my bills. Yes.
Yeah. So the second, there is nothing in my heart but God. That is like the ultimate human affirmation. That says I've wiped away all of the other stuff, and here you are. And the idea of the light of Muhammad is something that we could talk about for hours, but um, consider it important. And the ultimate affirmation is there is no God but God. That is the ultimate essence of the Wahdat al-Wujud.
The unity of being.
Yep.
Hmm.
So you can use that to focus. You can use other things. If you want to have a specific focus, you have to talk to us personally about this.
Say more about that so we can be clear about what
Because
we.
you have to give a person the focus that will work for them. And that requires a little sense of what the person needs.
Okay, yeah.
And you can't do that by getting a comment in this video going, I
Mhm.
want to know what mine is, because the answer is, how the hell should I know?
Yeah, because we're talking about more than just like, what's my zikr to use? We also mean, and some of you will already have a grasp of this from your own personal experience and discernment. What is it that works for you to keep you grounded and awake? Others among you may not know, or you
Yeah,
may have questions about that and you need a little guidance. That's what Mushtaq's talking about.
yeah. And I will tell you that you can't go wrong with La ilaha illallah. That is one that will work for everyone. So you can just use that.
There is no God but God.
Yeah,
And we say God in the broadest of terms. So you get to frame that how you connect with it.
yeah. Another way to understand this is there is no reality but God. There is no reality but the one reality.
Mhm.
There is no separation. There is no God and other. There is just the one being. And it actually is pretty heavy, but you can use that. Or anything else that you think will work for you, give it a try. The worst that can happen is that your head will explode, at which point you have no worries.
Your work is done.
But, you know, there's a couple dozen Hindu mantras I can think of that work pretty well for this. Keep you focused. The Arabic ones I think work best because that's where this tradition comes from. They're more attuned, but I may be prejudiced when it comes to that. So, anyway, here we are. We are trying to focus on this state, and in a bit, we'll tell you how to begin to develop it. The specific super effort that you make that will get you into this,
Into the second one.
into the second wind. If you get stuff coming up like fear, disorientation, things like that, the thing that gets you out is compassion and an observer position, because observer position what got you into it, and it will keep you centered into it. But the exercise of compassion will keep you focused properly. We'll get to that.
Yeah, it might help you feel safer, grounded, more stable in a moment that might feel a little bit overwhelming to start.
Yeah. And you'll confront paradoxes. The main paradox is all is one versus all is many. Both are true. Both are absolutely true from our perspective. And we need to embrace the paradox and resolve it to a higher octave. The way I recommend doing that is realizing that this is a field phenomena. It's not about things. And on one pole of the field is unity, and on the other pole of the field is multiplicity. And they're part of the same field, part of the same waveform. And where you focus your attention is what you experience in that moment.
Any questions so far?
Um,
Yeah,
yeah,
Nancy and then Osama. Sorry. Go ahead, Nancy.
just wondering whether grounding especially includes awareness of the ground, or is it just any perception?
Not
Um,
particularly, but it can absolutely be
yeah.
included in that.
Yeah, for me, when I do grounding, I do it barefoot. And I like to do Qigong grounding exercises.
Mm.
That's me. It's probably you too, because you know those well.
Yeah.
So yeah, it has to do with feet on the ground.
Well, to clarify, there is this specific like practice that people think about in electromagnetic terms where you go like put your bare feet in the grass or in the dirt. We're not talking about that specifically, but if that helps you feel stable and present in your body, then by all means. But we're talking about any kind of practice that helps you feel that way. Is that helpful, Nancy?
Yes.
Great. Thanks. Good question. Osama, how about you?
Yeah, I just a clarifying question. So we're talking about the unity of being, God state, as far as Gurdjieff, like in that kind of tradition. Second, like a spiritual second wind. I got lost in the connection of what is it really? What like what is the connection in between them as far as there's a I got
Basically,
lost.
the God state and Wahdat al-Wujud is the same thing. It's an experience of exactly the same phenomena.
Okay. And if I understand you correctly, you're asking how does a spiritual second wind tie to those things? Is that correct?
Yeah.
Okay.
So that's a very good question. And the answer, more or less, is your second wind temporarily breaks your machine. It dislocates it. It pushes it away so that you are not as um, blinded by the mechanical workings of your own mind. And that's the benefit of the spiritual second wind. And that's what, in my humble opinion, Gurdjieff was trying to accomplish with his so-called super efforts. I don't think that he understood the phenomena of the second wind clearly enough, or at least he couldn't communicate it clearly enough. And so uh, people maybe didn't get it as much, and they thought that they just had to work till they dropped. And going for a spiritual second wind is not working till you drop. If you drop, you have failed in the exercise. So
So
this gets us into this idea.
so I would think that this spiritual second wind allows us to create more openness to this sense of the God state or to Wahdat al-Wujud. Yes.
Yeah, and Rat asked the question, is this what G called the small and large accumulator? And my answer is I suspect so. But I have heard so much bullshit around that stuff that I can't say for sure. But I think that that is correct, that this relates to that.
Did we remotely answer your question, Osama?
Absolutely. Thank
Okay.
you.
Great.
So, the nature of phenomenal consciousness, which is just a fancy word for the machine, is that there is a biopsychological conditioning that leads to a lack of conscious awareness of one's true I. The true I is what we think of as the seer, the witness. It's what, according to Patanjali, is the ultimate goal of yoga, is to put oneself into the position of the seer through the stilling of the mechanical personality.
AKA being awake as we
Yes.
define it.
Yeah, and the inability to be present is exemplified by the internal dialogue, or as we like to call it, the infernal dialogue, because it never quits until you make it quit. And one of the ways you can make it quit is through hitting second wind. And this is something that is true pretty much with any second wind. I noticed it in running back in the day when I was a youngster. And my whole thing was doing cross country races. And if it was a good race and I pushed myself exactly hard enough, I would hit second wind and sometimes third wind. And my mind would be completely shut off. It's related to what they call runner's high. And you have all the endorphins and things like that. But it was more than that, I came to realize.
Not quite a whole body experience, but I mean, I've certainly experienced that. Let's say I am staying up late writing. I'm writing, then I hit the wall of struggle. But I know I have to keep going because it has to be done tomorrow, let's say. And at some point, it feels like I'm back in the zone. I'm committed. I'm doing the thing. The words are flowing. It's just working, and there's nothing distracting me. For me, that's kind of an intellectual, as well as a bit of a spiritual second wind.
Yeah. So, how do you do this, you may well ask? Or not. Anybody want to know how to do this?
Yes, Todd is enthusiastic. Yeah.
Good. Well, you remember that exercise that we did last week, the sensing exercise? You start there. You close your eyes and you sense yourself. You sense inside your own skin. But it doesn't stop there. Once you've found your own skin, you hold that and open your eyes and sense the world around you while continuing to sense inside of yourself, inside your body and outside your body. Physical being, world. Not just with your eyes, but with all your senses. And then you find your own I. You have two referential experiencings going on, and then you need one reflexive experience. And that is sensing your own I doing this. Now, the trick is to hold these all three at the same time with a kind of adamantine concentration. And at first you will fail after a few moments. And when you do, you have to pull yourself back and you have to hold this state for longer and longer until you almost can't stand it anymore. At which point, if you are lucky, you will kick into your second wind. And these states will be remarkably easier to hold. and you practice. And then you fall unconscious usually, at least at first. You notice after like 20 minutes, you have not been present. You've lost the whole thing. But then you can go back to it.
You can start from the basics again, retuning into the body, the sensory processes inside, then outside, then turning it on your own consciousness. Todd, I see you unmuted. Would you like to share with us a thought?
Yeah, the difficulty I'm having is the reflexive attention without chatter.
Yeah, it's really hard.
It's being aware of myself and shutting up at the same time.
It's
Um,
hard. It is hard.
the first two are actually pretty easy.
Yeah,
But
relatively speaking. It's usually not terribly easy to hold it for any great period of time without having an attentional blink. But once you get that reflexive part in there, the attentional blinks come fast and furious if you're not careful.
the other thing, and this was just perhaps trying to do too many things at once, was doing it in motion got confusing very quickly.
Yeah. That's why to start, this is just sitting, there is a step beyond this that we may talk about sometime in the future that involves doing this in motion. Because once you get a handle on doing this while sitting, it becomes easier and easier. But you don't want to be like the Buddha in the cave, sitting staring at the wall, right? You may need to do the laundry. And so there are practices beyond uh, just sitting.
I remember Teal's grandfather, who was lifelong, very, what's the word, very enthusiastic Buddhist practitioner. His suggestion was, the last conversation we had with him was to get to the point where one could do it while walking and then
Yes.
while working. But that's several steps beyond.
Yeah, that'll take a week or two.
Yeah. Um, any hints on how to keep that reflexive attention non-verbally?
Struggle,
Pardon?
struggle,
Okay.
struggle with it.
Okay.
This is literally, you have to set your intention to do this and keep pulling yourself back and back and back. This is the super effort.
Yep. Yep.
And it's hard at first, and it will be frustrating, and you will be pissed off at yourself, then pissed off at the world, and then eventually pissed off at me for suggesting this. In which case, I will tell you to blame Gurdjieff for it or something. But then you will get past all of that, and all of a sudden you'll go, wow. And then you'll start talking to yourself about how cool it is, and you'll lose it. And then you have to do it again.
Yeah.
But every time you succeed, it gets easier.
And every time you catch yourself doing that, it can serve as actually an encouragement rather than something to be disappointed by, because it's a reminder to practice. If you can catch yourself chattering away to yourself, then you know you're making progress. That in and of itself is an achievement.
Now, we
Did you have more
mentioned
to
that,
add, Todd? No. Okay.
No, it was that was that is helpful.
Oh, I'm so glad to hear that.
It
Good.
sounds like everything important, simple, but not easy.
yep.
Mushtaq, as you were saying.
What was I saying?
that this is hard and we keep coming back to it.
Yeah. So one of the tools that we have for dealing with this is invocation. Now, what does this word mean? Invocation, not evocation, but invocation. Anybody got a definition?
I would say it means calling forth.
From? You're not wrong, but a little bit more nuance. So, evocation is calling forth from the inside. Invocation is calling forth from the outside, from the higher to the lower rather than the lower to the higher. And then basic terms. So, what do you invoke and how do you invoke it?
I would say you invoke the sacred.
Yes, that would be correct. You would invoke the sacred. How would you go about doing that?
I would go about it by attempting to put myself in a state where I could accept that, where I could hold that.
Okay. So a few weeks ago, we did a talk called Ibn Arabi's Secret. And in it, we subtly gave a method of invocation. And for those of you who are in the Nine-Sided Circle Forum on Facebook, you can find the document that Noor and I posted there, a PDF in the files area on exactly this. We aren't going to go through it again tonight because um, I don't want to be here all night. But here we are. We look at that and we see that Arabi did some tricky things around the idea of invocation.
Yes. So Todd is helping us out by offering the definition of invoking as calling on the higher by name. And I looked it up online. Officially, we have things like to petition for help or support, to appeal to or cite as authority, to call forth by things like incantation, to make an earnest request for, to put into effect or operation, to bring about, to cause. So all of these things kind of bring up this sense of, as you said, Mushtaq, inviting in something outside of us, let's say, in order to allow it to, in this case, inspire us, essentially, to support us, to bring the higher down to the lower, some people might say. And an invocation then is the process of doing that.
So you have to be tricky sometimes with this. And one of the tricks you use is that you understand your chief feature. You all know what the chief feature is by this point, right? Anybody not familiar with that term?
Sama has questions. He's not sure what that means. So,
Okay, the chief feature is the fixation point of your attention. It's when you go to sleep, your attention fixates on something. By the way, can anybody read the transcript here? Are you seeing it?
They have to choose to see it. You have to do view full transcript. I can see it now.
Okay, good. I am testing this out now since M showed up. We are putting out what I'm saying is being translated into Turkish as we speak.
Oh, for you.
Yeah.
Yes. Okay. I don't think everybody sees that, Mushtaq.
Okay, then go to where your captions are and turn them on and turn on translation. And you should be seeing what I'm saying in Turkish. Tamam. O zaman. No. Yeah.
I think each person has to set up the captions so that they have the language that you're speaking in and then the language that they choose to read it in. So
Yes.
yes,
I
now
am
I'm
speaking
seeing it
in,
coming up in
yeah,
Turkish.
I am speaking in English and translating into Turkish.
Okay. So someone else would be able to put it in Arabic or Indonesian. So we have turned on that option now for those who are joining us live.
Yay.
So many language options. So
Yeah, we're
check those
trying
out.
to really get this working, so y'all are guinea pigs.
Anywho, Mushtaq.
Okay, anyway, we were back at the chief feature. So, the Enneagram of personality people tried to turn this into personality stuff, but it's not. It is the fixation of attention when you sleep. Everybody has a favorite place to go to sleep. And there are ways to discern what this is and what it means and how to work with it. One of the ways to work with it is learn what your fixation of attention is and then use that as a trigger to remind you to wake up. When you use this practice, anytime you notice that you have slipped into your chronic fixation of attention, into your chief feature, you stop and you do this practice to bring yourself back awake. Attending to your inner world, the outer world, and then reflexively attending to you as being. Does that make sense?
Any questions on that? Okay. So this is very similar to what we were just talking about with catching yourself chattering away in your head and using that as an opportunity to say, oh, I can reset now. I can go back to the practice. You catch yourself doing your fixated habits once you recognize them for what they are, of course, once you've learned how to do that and you've made that step forward, you can use those moments as a reminder to tune back into invoking.
Yeah, and there's a lot more to this, but this is the basics.
Anybody want to offer any examples of things that you don't have to share anything super private or anything, whatever you're comfortable with, but what are some examples of things that might serve as reminders for you? Would anybody like to share?
Um, oh, probably resentment and regrets.
Okay, moments of resentment and regret, those feelings coming up, taking notice of them, reflecting on them, and
Don't
seeing,
try and stop them, though.
yeah, it's not about self-judgment, is it, Mushtaq?
No. And it's not about changing anything. It's about using what you were experiencing as a stepping stone to your own awakening.
Mm-hmm. Great example,
Then,
Nancy.
yeah, I'm not very sure how I would do that. Just kind of notice, oh, I'm doing it again, or what?
Yeah, just, oh, I'm experiencing my chief feature. And then I guess, excuse me, I guess I'm going to sense myself, sense the world, and watch myself as I do this.
Okay.
Yeah. It gives you an opportunity to get comfortable, more comfortable with the things that you may in the past have a tendency to shame yourself for, to shove away, to cringe away from.
Oh no, I like the resentment part.
Great, own it. Thanks for sharing, Nancy. Now, someone else was unmuted and had their hands up.
That was me, but Nancy already kind of covered it for me. I mean,
Well, share yours. Yeah.
um, it's pretty straightforward. When I start to get into an argument in my head about who should have done what and why and when, what I should have said back then, how I'm going to handle that, just that little rabbit hole.
Mm-hmm.
That's how that is how I go to sleep. There's all kinds of motives fitting into that. They're all pretty basic and primitive though. So that's a very clear cut thing for me to use. I do
And
use.
a
Um,
very, just like Nancy's, another very relatable example, I'm
mm.
sure, for many people.
There's one big log argument in my head that achieves nothing except getting me worked up and more involved in it.
Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah. Hmm. Good example. Would anyone else like to share? Oh, Sheree, feel free.
I have this chest infection at the moment, and so losing the breath has actually been really interesting to have the sensation of when you can't breathe and being able to put your hands on your own body and to feel when you can feel that anticipation of that cough coming and you think, can I actually bring it to normal, so it's like you can feel everything around that. But I also did something on the weekend which was different because I have physical practices that I like to do, and often when you're doing some physical training you're counting reps. And I said to a friend, I said I stopped counting reps. I said I started to feel if the body had enough. And I said, that was different. So when you're looking for that second wind, or can you do just that little bit more? I said, when you slow everything down, it is a different way of practicing versus I'm going to pump out 3 sets of 10, 30 reps. I'm going to do it in this time and da-da-da-da. It's not a performance thing. It's about that feeling and full experience of something. So I find this sort of marries into that feeling, and finding that state and being grateful of just breathing, just feeling, I am grateful I can take another breath. I'm grateful I can slow this down. I'm grateful it hasn't stopped completely, because you get to that point where you can be coughing so much you feel like you're going to expire. So I feel that you can use it not just for but for all the practices that you've got. That's what I wanted to say.
Oh, I think that's excellent. And you reminded me that physical sensation as well as in, other kinds of psychological mental processes can serve as these reminders. Yeah.
Oh, you just reminded me of something of it's trusting that feeling. Because initially when I sometimes take on a practice, I think, am I doing this right? Is this how I'm supposed to feel? Am I actually achieving a higher state? What is that? So it's that whole chatter thing that's going, how do you suspend that? So you think, slow it down. So I have another friend that I was working with today, and he said, slow everything down and make it soft. Make everything soft. He said when you do a soft practice, he said, every stroke that you're doing will reveal where you're weakest, because when you're doing something at speed, you can cover up using momentum. But when you can do it slow and still get a good shot of whatever you're doing or whatever you're practicing, he said it will reveal itself to you. And so I think that's where I found it so useful to trust that process. Don't rush it. Don't rush it. Take your time, feel it, and that invoking of something starts having its own presence felt. It's like you're bumping up against a soft bubble and you can't see it. You have to feel it. And I'm thinking, right. And there was just moments like that. I think when I got it, I got it. But when I lost it, I go, what did I do just then? I tried to hit a bit harder, or I did something too fast, or I was thinking about lunch. Got to get lunch. I could come back here. So this is where my practice, my fixations can be in fractions of seconds, and I think, stop it. That trusting, capture that, and as you said, Mushtaq, you got to hold on to it just long enough so that you can recognize it when it happens again. So I say, slow down, go soft, feel it.
Yeah. That is the whole secret of Tai Chi right there.
Yep. Yeah. That's great, Sheree, because you have spoken to the fact that things that we might categorize as positive sensations, things we might categorize as negative sensations, they both serve to support us in a practice like this. We don't need to overthink them and analyze them, take them apart, just to think, am I doing it right because I'm having this good or bad feeling? It's irrelevant. You take note, you use that as a stepping stone, as Mushtaq said. You can't really do it wrong if you can get to a point where that becomes possible for you. Yeah. And all it takes is practice to be able to do that. So I hope people find that to be an encouragement that there are so many ways to do this. Would anybody else like to share? Carl, please.
I have to say that I'm not 100% sure of what we're talking about.
Okay, thank you.
I think what we're talking about is how to get ourselves into a higher state and a condition of being in a state of oneness with the all.
That's pretty much it. Yeah.
I find that whenever I'm in nature, and I'm a gardener and a carpenter, and if I'm touching material, especially natural materials, but even metal or lumber, but especially rocks and dirt and plants, then I am in that state. And that happens to me almost every day. And there are days when I need to drive myself out to do it. And there are days when I feel like I'm rotting at my computer or something like that. And I don't want to go out. But when I do, then I'm transported into that state. And I'm actually able to be in that state when I'm communing with nature.
That's lovely. Thank you,
Yeah.
Carl. Yeah. Yeah, I don't think you were off the mark. I appreciate you being honest that you were a little bit lost, shall we say. And I think that it really deserves for us to keep reiterating what we mean over and over again. Yeah.
Yeah. And if what you described works for you, keep doing it. Don't stop.
Yeah.
Osama,
Osama.
there's an echo.
Yeah, what Carl just said also reminded me of my visit to Morocco a few months back in December, and I encountered some people who in Morocco they would call Bouhalis, which means masters of states, or in their dialect, in the Moroccan dialect, it just means crazy people. Like
Yeah.
they would just call them crazy people. Um, and that kind of encounter with that kind of personality, for some reason, it felt like I got bit by whatever that bug is, and it makes those states of that oneness, that state of oneness, and it is a state kind of like what you said, Mushtaq, meaning like it's not a station, it's not stationary, it's just consistent, it's so fluid. Um, and to be able to allow for the external and interactions with other people to be the trigger of that state. And to have no fear in allowing for the internal and external to just really become one. In the veil from the internal and external becomes so thin as far as the if it's excitement, it manifests completely. So it becomes the state of oneness um, of the internal and external, and the observer is also it's just like doing this to the entire experience itself. So ever since that trip, I think that's been those triggers of just being at a cafe, being with people. It just triggers that moment of does that oneness. And now obviously it doesn't, it doesn't stretch all the way, but the practices like what you guys just shared or meditation kind of allows it to get longer and longer and longer. For when the trigger does come, it's more sustained, it sustains longer time.
Good way of describing it. Thank you,
Yeah.
Osama. Yeah. What's on your mind, Mushtaq?
Trying to think if there's anything more I want to say about this tonight.
Yeah. I think I would suggest revisiting the practice from last week
Yes.
Also revisiting the practice that we discussed with Ibn Arabi's secret,
Yeah,
whether
where you're
you
learning to literally invoke the present moment.
Yep. And you can rewatch that video and you can find the notes that we shared about that practice from that video on our Facebook group. And for those of us who are here live, you can find the link directly to that in the chat right now. But combining all of these things together allows you to have more access to this state that we're talking about this evening, in which you're building on what you already know. You're building on what already comes naturally to you. And I mean that in every sense. Like, if resentment is what comes naturally to you right now, you can use that as a building block towards staying awake. If getting tense because you are not feeling well is what's coming up for you right now, you can use that as a stepping stone. If you're excited about something that's happening 2 weeks from now and you can barely contain yourself and you keep getting distracted by your excitement about that thing, you can use that as a stepping stone for this practice as well. You can use pain. You can use hunger. You can use sleepiness. I think that's a tough one because, as we know, if your cup is empty, you probably want to fill it before you start trying to put a lot of time and effort into practices. But you get to experiment and see what stepping stones work best for you right now. And as you grow and as you spend time on this practice and gain more a sense of continuity with it and dedication and regularity, you'll find that there are very few limitations on this. So that's pretty
Yeah.
much what
So
I have to
try this
say.
out. Tell us about it in the comments. We've had a couple of
Yes.
people do it from the last week.
Yeah,
We
which
want
we
to
appreciate.
hear what your experiences are.
Yep.
You never
Yes.
know. You might become famous by doing that. I don't know
Yep.
how, but you might be.
And as an update on my practice from last week, I did find it challenging. I think with lots of stuff going on in the world right now, I feel very pulled from moment to moment to, scroll through social media, to scroll through my email for news updates. So that says to me that that's a thing that I can use to work on my practice right now. Use those as my reminders that I need to use those as my stepping stones to strengthen my ability to be present and intentional. So we're all in this together. But we only make, I'm going to say gains, doing the reps, as I like to say, means doing the reps is what allows us to become more confident and skillful at this. If we don't do the reps, don't expect results.
Yep.
But you absolutely can do this if there is a desire to do so. Any last thoughts or questions before we wrap? Yeah.
Osama has one.
Yeah, talking about the reps. I was talking to a friend of mine earlier today, and I was sharing with her that the last 3 years or something like that, like my meditation practice, my dhikr practice, um, was so consistent daily, every single day, that and journaling, that and journaling. And there was this moment where I really don't know what like what it was, but there's this moment of me questioning whether or not I was doing it for the feeling of like, oh, I've been doing it consistently for so long, or just doing the practice itself for the practice. And I don't know why, but this thought of like, hey, I'm gonna stop and see what that's like. Um, and just now, like hearing you on this call, talking about like just doing the practice, and it doesn't matter what it is, or if it's good or bad, or um, the reasoning behind it. It can start to reveal itself. Because what I'm learning now is having stopped that consistency, it's taking so much effort to get back into that consistency.
Mhm.
And it's like such a big lesson of like, whatever it is, allow for the consistency to stay, if there is if I want to figure out more of the reason of why, stay with the stay with the practice, stay with the consistency, and try to go deeper within that to the reasoning, or maybe behind the intention itself. Because doing a pause, all that momentum, it's like, okay, gone. And now starting the momentum again, it's like, sounds like that super effort, maybe that Sal was talking about. It requires so much. Um, but absolutely right. The reps and that consistency, it just builds in such a compounding effect that I just, I had to learn pretty much the hard way of, okay, damn, now I gotta build it back up again. And it just takes so much.
I bet.
Yeah, yeah,
And yet, what an educational experience for you. You say you learned it the hard way, but perhaps, I mean, we can look at this at multiple different levels of context, right? And on one level of context, I messed up. I dropped the ball. I shouldn't have done that. Now I'm like struggling. And on another level, you're kicking it up a notch. You're going to learn from this,
right,
and you're going to get something out of it. You are getting something out of it. So, no failure here.
right, right. I mean, yeah, that's the attitude, right? And I feel like that's part of the stepping stone is the
Exactly.
accepting, the acceptance of that, just to, to get back up on
Yes.
that. But absolutely that consistency and that practice, um, and the compound effect that it builds
Mhm.
and that it gives is
So many
yeah,
facets.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you, Osama. That's great. Keep up the good work. Ian.
Yeah, I'll certainly echo what Osama has just said about the consistency of practice. Many years ago, I went into a phase where I started only practicing when I felt like it. And ultimately, I decided that that was a bad idea. And for many years now, I have practiced every single day, maybe missing less than one day a year when something came up. And one of the things I found recently, because my practice has been getting not every day improving, but generally on the whole, it's been getting to places where I had never been before. And this is sort of going off at a little bit of a tangent, but compared with what you've been talking about tonight. But I've been started to speculate, and the only language I know of to even begin talking about this is to use Gurdjieff's concept of hydrogens in the food diagram, and that the practices, for example, you start with the basic food, then you have the air octave, and then you have the impressions octave. And to me, practices like this are a way of driving something in the impressions octave. And what I speculate, because I've been finding that there seems to be something building up that is persistent and helps me just continue to get better. And it's very much a feeling. I wish I had a more variety of ways to even think about it intellectually than Gurdjieff. But I just wonder whether you have any thoughts on that, whether it's way off base or
No, I think you're probably on base. I personally dislike Gurdjieff's whole hydrogens thing. It sounds stupid to me, but what you're saying doesn't sound stupid, if that makes any sense.
uh, absolutely, because I wish I had a better way of talking about
Yeah,
We work
it.
with what we got, right? Yeah.
yeah. And who knows, you're a fairly clever fellow. You might find some way to talk about this that we can all steal from you, and then we'll all be happier.
I'll work on it.
You're absolutely welcome to. And when
And there's a couple of other things I wanted to sort of vaguely comment on from earlier.
sure.
You started off by talking about the paradox of uh, the unity and the one in many.
Hmm.
Yeah.
I mean, I've thought for a long time that the world is kind of built on paradox, because if there weren't paradoxes, everything would collapse. It's the paradoxes that allow for existence.
You may be completely right about that. I
Um,
I wouldn't try and argue against it.
yeah. What was it? What was the other thing that was running through my mind? Um, Short-term memory, just things evaporate. So maybe it'll come back to me before we go off air.
Thanks, Ian. Thank you so much for sharing. There's a couple people we haven't heard from. Not too much pressure, but I would love to offer you guys the opportunity to share either speaking or in the chat before we end up wrapping up and saying goodbye, about maybe some stepping stones you see in your own life that might help you to step into this commitment to practice, forward momentum, that kind of thing, or anything else we've spoken about this evening. I've been having a lot of shoulder and neck tension this week, so that's going to continue to be one of mine. That's for sure. How about you, Mushtaq? What are some stepping stones for you?
Um, Dealing with triggering situations is good. Like last night, Noor and I have been binge watching a TV show called The Pit.
I'm sure many of you are watching it right now. It's quite popular. It's very
And
good.
I will have to say that usually I cannot stand watching medical shows, hospital shows, because I spent a decade working in hospitals, and most of them, most of the time, are utter bullshit and have very little to do with medicine. This show is a bit unique in that, yeah, it's still sensationalized for viewing, but their portrayal of an ER is a lot closer to reality than people realize. It's not there. It's not real in the sense that you'll see this if you go to like Stanford ER or something, but it's close enough. And the last, what, 3 episodes were about a mass shooter incidents and
Not too many
watching.
spoilers there, but yeah.
Yeah, we aren't going to say too much about it, except that it was way too realistic. And uh, back in 1982, I went through a disaster situation when I was working for Santa Cruz County General, the Great Flood of '82. And I found just watching this to be, and Nora can tell you, I was like,
Oh, yeah, we both
yeah,
were, but you definitely were revisiting some things.
yeah. A time when they had to bring in refrigeration trucks to use as extensions to the morgue. And I discovered that I'm still triggered by that.
Yeah.
So that's going to be one for me for the next few days.
Yeah. Yeah. And you reminded me of the big one for me this week was my friend in Los Angeles passing away, Hasna Masnavi, who was one of the founders of the Women's Mosque of America down in LA. She was only 39 years old, died suddenly of complications from diabetes type 1. And there's a lot about the loss of her that brought up stuff for me. Like, not only do I miss her, I miss many of my friends in LA, but I've always admired her dedication to her dream of building up this institution that has been remarkably influential and yet in some ways a bit overlooked over the past decade. And it reminds me that when we have a big aim like that, similar to what we have with the nine-sided circle, every day is a reflection on what's possible right now. And how can I use what's possible today to think about the longevity of what I'm working on? And that was very grounding for me in the sense that it's we never know how much time we have. So how do we work with the moment now that we have? And as much as I was in my feelings about, the grief and the, just a few things that went unsaid or undone in my friendship with her that I would have loved to be able to close the loop on. She is leaving a legacy just in that for me. She's inspiring me to continue my work and to see how I can support the longevity of her dream, of her aim as well. So we never know how we're going to influence each other in those ways too. All right. So, good work, everyone. I'm hoping that you'll take the time to reflect this week on all of those things in your life that maybe you look at now, or at least previously to this conversation, as things that are in your way but are actually means of pushing through, of moving forward, and of not putting yourself down just because you come up against a feeling that perhaps you don't like, or a sensation that you don't like, or an observation you're making that you don't like. You can use it all.
All right. Well, I am going to switch us over to Brady Bunch mode.
Hooray, Brady Bunch mode. All right. Thank you so much, everyone. We didn't go too much overboard this evening, which is good. We're not
And
up
I
till
promise
midnight.
you that next week we will get even weirder.
But keep up the good work. Revisit those talks we mentioned. That's the one from last week and the one about Ibn Arabi's secret. Again, you can find the materials for that in the files thing on our Facebook group. And yeah, we encourage you to join that if you haven't already.
Yeah, because that's where we put all of this stuff up.
That's how we try to keep things organized. So,
Yeah.
yes, Ian?
Just a hint. Do a search for Ibn Arabi. That's the easiest way to find the post.
Oh, you don't even have to do that. You just click on files, and it's the very
It's
first
buried
thing.
it's buried in there, or at least it was when I tried to look.
Oh, it should
Maybe
be
No,
at the top.
I just checked it before the talk, and it's the very first file under the file section.
Oh, it's buried in the posts for sure. You're not
Yeah, but
gonna,
you
you don't
don't
have
go
to,
to the post. That'll take
yeah.
forever. There's a tab across the top. It says media and files. You click on files and you'll find it immediately.
you are indeed right, sir.
Yes.
Well, thank you
Yeah,
for
we
doing
checked
I
that.
this
didn't
before
manage
the
to
talk
find
so
it.
that we knew how to tell people to find it.
Yeah. Much appreciated though that you took the time.
Yeah. All
All
right,
right.
folks.
Thanks so much, everybody. We can leave to
We'll,
each other. Everybody
yeah,
watching on the replay.
and we'll see you next time.
Bye.